Good afternoon, and thank you for joining the Engineering Dyslexia webinar, the IET's first webinar on dyslexia, developed by the newly created IET Neurodiversity Focus Group. I'm Jo Foster, Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Lead at the IET, and I'm absolutely thrilled to be here today to chair this session during National Dyslexia Week. As you may know, the IET is on a journey towards becoming more inclusive, and this webinar is actually one of the many ways that we're able to demonstrate that commitment whilst doing our part to address the engineering skills shortage. But before we get started, I'd really like to open today's session with a quote by a lady called Erica Cook, a Learning Ally member. "I don't suffer from dyslexia, I live with it and work with it. I suffer from the ignorance of people who think that they know what I can or cannot do." Now, I thought that I'd open the session with that quote because it's very apt given some of the messaging that you're going to hear in today's short talks, and due to the fact that many dyslexics are often underestimated, overlooked, and the condition is frequently seen as a negative trait. Part of what we want to do with this talk is to alter the negative perceptions and highlight the many benefits, as well as some of the challenges. So what are some of the other reasons that we're running this event today? Well, it's clear that many dyslexics have to navigate processes that were designed for neurotypicals, which creates a huge disadvantage and disservice for those individuals. So it's vital that the engineering community removes those barriers in order to be truly inclusive and provide equal and professional opportunity for all. We at the IET are aware that our processes are not exempt from that same consideration, and we will continue to work towards creating inclusive processes for all. As you can imagine, this will take time to implement, so do please bear with us. However, we are fortunate enough to be working with our neurodiversity focus group to help guide us through this process and share some of their lived experience. We also have the full support of our Board of Trustees and executive team to deliver equality, diversity and inclusion across the IET. So just to give you a little bit of background, there's a report by the CIPD called Neurodiversity at Work. And they state that it is now widely accepted that neurominorities represent in total a large percentage of the overall population, likely greater than 10%. For organisations, this means that more than 1 in 10 job applicants, existing staff and customers are likely neurodivergent in some way. I really wanted to mention that because I think that it's an incredibly important point, given that the engineering profession has a significantly larger cohort of dyslexics than any other occupation. It is key that we create a day where engineers with dyslexia are specifically highlighted and where continuous action can be taken. The IET is incredibly pleased to be shedding light on this important topic to inspire, inform and influence the wider community and take significant action on this important topic. So that's all from me, but before I go, please do follow the hashtags Engineering Dyslexia for upcoming information in this area of work and to find out how you can get involved in the future and demonstrate your commitment. Also, please do connect with our speakers via LinkedIn and other social media platforms. Thank you.
Hello, and may I start by thanking the IET and in particular Jo Foster for hosting this webinar for Dyslexia and Engineering Day. When I first suggested the idea to Jo, she not only listened in a very helpful way, but she turned this into a reality. So big thank you, Jo. Can't thank you enough. My name is Stephen Gill. I'm a refrigeration and engineering consultant, and I like to think of myself as a diversity and inclusion champion, something that's been a common theme throughout the whole of my life and particularly my working career. And yes, I am dyslexic. I struggled through school. Certainly, I wouldn't describe these as the best years of my life. Not at all. No, far from it. I was in remedial class all the way through due to my inability to read and write. And no matter how many teachers I had or how many different approaches and standards, nothing worked. It seemed that the best thing I was successful at school was failing exams, unfortunately. But no, I wasn't a total failure in that sense. I either left school with CSEs, for the older people may know what they are, in technical drawing, yes, and that was with the pen, and metalwork. University was obviously out of the question, and in truth, it was the last place I'd want to be. I didn't want to go back to an educational establishment ever again. So my helpful career advisor suggested that I took up a practical trade. That seemed like a good idea. And painting and decorating and engineering are two things that he suggested. So they arranged for interviews for both. I was offered jobs at both as trainees, and I took up an engineering apprenticeship in one of the old-fashioned heavy engineering companies that have now since long gone. Thankfully, I had a wonderful employer who took me on board and gave me funding for day release and evening classes. And I found myself more at home with the lecturers that I found there. They embraced, or at least understood, technicians who were not so used to reading and writing, and were able to help us through the course and progressed us through the tests. We didn't like to call them exams; they were tests. And to cut a long story short, I went on through day release to take an ONC, which I passed, and HNC, both in engineering. And after that, I had the thirst for learning, and I went on to take an MBA at business school and a Masters of Law. And at the tender age of 61, yes, that's hard to believe, I'm still learning. This is a great time to be an engineer. And if there's one thing that society needs as a whole right now, it's some new ideas and some creative ways of thinking to look at the global challenges that we face, from the environment to vaccines to transport to everything. We need to look at fresh ideas. And dyslexics are naturally creative, entrepreneurial, many of them, innovative and problem solvers, and problem solving in a different way. So it's hardly surprising that many of us end up in engineering, where we can put our natural abilities to good use. These creative and problem solving techniques are at the heart of engineering, and I believe it's time that we focus on our strengths rather than the challenges that we talked about. But I do see these challenges, the challenges I face, I see them in the young people that are coming through. Many, when you talk to them about professional associations, joining the IET, for example, or even worse, registering for engineering council as a C-Eng or an I-Eng, it fills them with dread. The forms are just not, and the process is just not helpful to them. So they sit outside of it, unfortunately. But if we as an engineering profession are to progress and benefit from these creative individuals, we really need to look at the processes and support these that learn differently and think differently. Thankfully, that's exactly what the IET is doing just right now. Not only with this support for the first Dyslexia and Engineering Day, but in many of the other ways that they're reviewing their processes and discussing these things. Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Mamta Singhal, and I am a chartered design engineer. I'm also on the IET Council, and I have got about 15 years in industry. I want to talk to you about my dyslexic journey and the positives and negatives that I've experienced over my childhood, but also my time in industry. So I first of all want to talk about my chartership and the process that I went through. And I have to be honest, I was a little bit scared, and I probably postponed it for quite a few years because I was worried about the amount of paperwork, the forms and the process. And actually I could see my peers all flying through the process, and as a dyslexic, it just worried me. But I broke it down into 3 parts, which was the first part was the forms. I had 3 very strong international engineers that were supporting my work and were advocates of stuff I'd done in industry. So I knew I had great backing there. I had prototypes, and my CV was all up to date. All my personal development work was done. So I broke it down into the forms, which I put aside, and then I focused on the presentation, which was great because I've already done the work. So actually, it was just a case of visually putting it together with some words, and then the actual interview. And I guess with being dyslexic, it has been recognised that we have high verbal reasoning skills. So actually, the interview was actually quite good fun, and I really enjoyed talking about the products that I was involved in, both within the toy industry, but also in the food and drink. So I would strongly recommend those who are dyslexic and maybe a little bit worried about going for their accreditation, that go ahead and give it a shot, because the Institution of Engineering and Technology are going to support you through the process. And I think off the back of that, and last year I also spoke at the Dyslexia Scotland Education Conference. I coined the word dyslexia abilities, which is the positive abilities of being dyslexic. And many of us think dyslexia is a negative learning style. But indeed, there are challenges, but actually the positives are things like processing skills, connections and logic that we have, and they're amazing skills to have if you're an engineer. I can see connections and patterns and things that I don't think non-dyslexics can see easily. And since being at the IET, I've met fellow engineers who are dyslexics, and it's great working with them because they probably see the same things I do. So that's a lot of the positives. So I also want to talk about some of the challenges I've had, because it's not always been that easy. And at school, I was told that I may never go to university because I was written off as being stupid. I went on to get 3 degrees. I'm a visiting professor. I'm also a fellow. So it goes to show that actually dyslexics are very intelligent, very bright, very able, but we do struggle in certain areas. And it's with good support, good line management, good teachers, we can get there. But it still shocks me that there's some incredibly dated thinking that is demeaning and still very hurtful to me when I tell people about my dyslexic challenges. So a bit of a call to everyone out there that let's make dyslexia abilities viral. Let's actually showcase the positives of those dyslexics out there, and support the dyslexic engineers at the institution.
When I think about living with dyslexia, I see it as a positive. You know, I've always been good at visualizing concepts and foreseeing potential issues, especially when designing software architectures or engineering systems. It's given me and dyslexic engineers across the world the ability to naturally design systems more holistically before specializing on specific aspects of the design, which is where the foresight originates. I believe it's important that all dyslexic engineers and those with dyslexia in general recognize that they have a gift. Dyslexics tend to have more advanced spatial awareness and are highly creative and problem solvers. Now, although I see my dyslexia as a gift right now, it wasn't always that way. When I was growing up through the school system, particularly at primary school, I would get deep anxiety when the teacher would go around the class and ask us to read a paragraph one by one. You know, I would stumble over my words, and then that caused me to get this deep-rooted anxiety. It wasn't really until I started my degree at the University of Huddersfield where I got specialist support by tutors who knew exactly how to help those with dyslexia. You know, they taught me how to use specialist software and use various techniques to really help me portray my thoughts and ideas, something that I wasn't able to do through the school system. Ultimately, that led me to graduate a master's degree with a distinction. Now, when I left university, I started a job where I was regularly presenting and teaching programming courses. And I realized that was something I really loved doing. I loved communicating with people. But a few years after that, I moved job, and with moving job, I moved city, further away from my support network and my friends. And that deep-rooted anxiety slowly built its way up again because I no longer had this, I guess, validation. However, through work, I was able to access CBT, which is a form of therapy, which really helped me understand, you know, what my issues were, how to overcome them. And once again, I was seeing my dyslexia as a gift. So although there have been a few stumbling blocks where I've allowed dyslexia to really get me down, I've always built myself up. And now my message is always see your dyslexia as a gift, because it can't stop you from going out and giving these presentations, teaching courses, and doing the job that you ultimately love.
Hi, I'm Helen Cumming. I work for BAE Systems. I'm working in auxiliary engineers on naval ships on the Hunter class frigate at the moment. I've previously worked in land, where I've been working on the Challenger 2 life extension project and also in in-service support. My career path was not very linear. At school, I was an okay student, but then when it came to higher exams, I kind of stopped doing as well as I'd previously done. And I think it was a little bit disappointed. And then I managed to get into university, but I had a false start year. And then I was doing information library studies. I came away with a diploma because in my final year, my third year, I had a module all about essays and I just didn't do as well. So then I went on and worked in the oil and gas industry, and I managed to do quite well there, doing information management. I started getting more interested in the content of the documents rather than actually just having them bouncing off my desk. So I signed up for an HNC at night classes, did pretty well there. Went on then to move to Soil Machine Dynamics, which is a company which do ROVs, ploughs and trenchers. And I asked to do day release to go to university, and they let me, and they actually supported me through that. It was fantastic. However, in my final year, when I was doing my project proposal, my tutor kind of suggested I should get tested for dyslexia, and I was asking, is the proposal that bad? And he's like, no, the content's there, it's just in no semblance of order. So I went, got tested and found out I am dyslexic. And the university then helped me through my final year with my write-up of my university project. And I also got supplied with some little tools to help me in future, which is fantastic. So I got things like a screen reader, which I actually use at work now. And it helps level the playing field because it takes me more energy and about 3 times as long to process the information when I read it as somebody who does not have dyslexia. On top of this, I also have, when I'm tired, I get the words tend to sort of swim about. So I use a screen mask, which is just, it changes the color so you don't have a very defined white and black. And that helps me process my reading better as well. As part of BAE, I've been really lucky and I got sent to university, and I did a postgraduate certificate in defence modelling and simulation. And as part of that, I've used this amazing thing called a smart pen, and it actually records the audio while I write my notes. And when I go back to my notes and realise how badly written they are and I don't understand what they say, I can hold the pen on the page and it'll play the audio back from 5 seconds before I wrote that note. It is fantastic. And it really helped when it came to doing my postgrad cert. So that's been my experience. Basically, we've got new tools now which can help level the playing field and make it easier for us to exist in the workplace without having a disability which holds us back. Thank you.
Well, thank you everybody so much for joining today's session, and a huge thank you to all of our speakers today. It's been great to hear from you, and I'm sure that we'll have quite a few questions going forward. Before we start with the Q&A, if anybody does have any questions, please do feel free to write them in the chat comment screen below, and those will be passed to me. So if you see me looking down, it is because I'm getting questions sent to my phone. I'm not receiving any text messages, so it's all personal messages. So just so that you're aware of what's going on there. But yeah, so just a huge thank you to all of our speakers. I think that this is a particularly important event, and we'd really like to hear from all of you as to why you think that is. But Stephen, I'd really like to start with you because obviously you're all members of the IET Neurodiversity Focus Group, which is a member-facing focus group, and looks across a broad spectrum of neurodiversity. And we've had lots of ideas that have come out of that group, which we will embark on as time goes on. But this was one of the ideas that came out, and this was actually your idea. So I'm incredibly thankful for that. It was really great to have the opportunity to hear lots of different ideas and then put something into action. So I wanted to kick off and start with you. But if you're, just in case you're not aware, Stephen is actually a fellow of the IET and also founder of another event in National Day called World Refrigeration Day, which I will leave all of you to Google and have a look at. But it's a really spectacular event and grew unexpectedly. So it's really great to have everybody on board, including Stephen. So Stephen, I just wondered, you know, you came up with this idea. What was it that, why is this such an important topic to you and others with dyslexia specifically? And what is it that you might like to see the IET doing? What role do you see the IET playing, and other professional engineering institutions and or STEM organisations?
Thank you. Well, the idea was, yes, the idea was mine, but I share the responsibility for this day because you actually listened to what I was saying over that luncheon and took it forward. So I think of it as a joint day. So thank you for encouraging me with this crazy idea. It's for me, everything starts with awareness. Awareness as an individual of you know, where we are and what we can do, what we can achieve, what we're hiding things. Awareness as an organisation and awareness as an industry. Until the idea of it's an awareness day, obviously, but until we start with that, we start to get people thinking all the way across the spectrum from themselves to, you know, how they cope with their days and everything else. We're really going to struggle to take the concept forward of the creative side of dyslexia. What we needed today, more than ever, is some creative new thinking. We've got, I don't need to tell you the world problems that we're facing currently, but some fresh thinking. So the idea behind it, and thank you for the IET for taking it forward. So what I'm looking for, I suppose, is obviously raising awareness, but then moving forward with that to encourage people to come out and embrace, you know, the ideas that they're doing. It's to give everybody, to get the best out of everybody, I say.
Fantastic, thank you. And I'll open up the next question to anybody that, and if none of you actually say that you would like to answer, I will pick on you. So just bear that in mind. So one of the questions that's come in is, what should employers be doing to ensure that their employees with dyslexia are supported? Would anybody like to volunteer to take that question?
Yeah, I can answer that. One of the first things that probably should be getting done is actually doing the access to work application on the government website, and making sure that you're getting the right tick boxes checked. And after that, it's a case of treating each individual on their own, because it presents so differently for different people. So I think accessibility to work is definitely an important sort of first step, especially if the employer's not used to having to support people. And then after that, making sure that the individual is treated as an individual, because some tools that I use aren't maybe necessarily appropriate for other people, because just depends on which particular aspect of the dyslexic spectrum that affect them. Yeah.
Brilliant, thank you. Another question that's just come in is, what should employers be, sorry, bear with me, what are some of the biggest challenges that you've had to overcome? Now, that might be something that you all want to answer. So I know that in our focus group, we've all talked about, well, you've talked about your experiences, which I think are really powerful. So it'd be really great if you could tap into some of those if possible.
I think for me, some of the biggest challenges, I think I went to school in the 80s and the 90s, and there was a perception that this individual was not going to progress because my reading and writing was maybe below the average at that stage. But what I found is I was actually excelling in STEM subjects, which is what I went on to kind of pursue. And when I gained my confidence in those subjects, I found that I stopped worrying so much about English and literacy, and actually my literacy skills are around average, if not slightly above now, because I stopped taking the negative comments on board. So I think a lot of it is about dated thinking that's still prevalent. You know, I still come across people that are saying, I don't want to tell people that I'm dyslexic. And I was one of those people until very recently, because there is a perception that it is a problem. And indeed, there are challenges. But I also think we see this within the institution. Many of our very successful engineers, like Stephen, have progressed leaps and bounds within their profession. And it just goes to show that I question that they've been so successful, not despite, but because of their dyslexia.
That's fantastic, thank you. Would anybody else like to follow up on that at all? about the challenges that you may have faced?
I think in my experience, it's the confidence comment. It's the hardest thing to get over, is when you spend so much of your time getting bad marks for things through school and everything. And I still struggle with it, but I've got a better attitude towards it now. But basically getting over my own confidence issues caused by doing badly and expecting to do badly because I did badly before. And it's realizing that you can achieve. And it's once you get that first win, and I think for me it was getting my driving license, and everything from then became a bit of a, oh, I can do that. I can do anything. And it's that real finding that point where you're no longer judged by all your failures, you're judged by your wins.
And I think that's partly why I didn't go on to do my CEng kind of 10 years ago, because I was just so worried I wasn't going to pass it. And actually, my support team at the IET said, look, you're sitting there with all the work, all the experience, what's stopping you? And there was nothing stopping me apart from my own confidence. And it instills from those school days when people were telling me, you're not going to progress in your career, you're not going to get far. And I still see it now. You tell people you're dyslexic and they honestly think you're stupid. And it's really sad that we have those attitudes.
Yeah, and I'm hoping that this is the start of many talks that we'll have, and we will be doing a lot more than this. So I'm hoping that will get, at least start to get that message out there. Sorry, Stephen.
Oh, I was just going to probably repeat what the others said, but work has a way of reminding you at times. I'm slightly older than the rest of you here. I know that's hard to believe, it's true. But when you start through your career, you've had the experiences of school, which perhaps are not so good. So in the workplace, the first meeting you go to, they say, oh, you're the new person, would you take the minutes? Nightmare. You then get a bit further along and you're progressing your career, you've got over all those obstacles. Can you make a speech? Here's what we've prepared for you. There's ways, it is confidence, absolutely. But you have to, once you've got over that, you have to keep it as well. I mean, I know that's hard to describe, but there are barriers or reminders and bumps in the road all the way along. And I still face them when I'm having to face this, read something out or whatever.
Thank you. Tom, did you want to take an opportunity to say anything on this one? If not, I can ask another question.
No, I think the main challenge that I've had is just having the confidence to know that I can succeed at something, and not let those voices from when you were at school saying that, oh, they're in the slow class, and not let that get to be now. But yeah, ever since I've got my degree, I'm working towards chartership now, and it just goes to show that even if you struggle in school with dyslexia, in industry, you can achieve anything that you want to.
Absolutely. I'm just wondering, again, I'll throw this out to everybody. I mean, what do you think it's the responsibility of organisations to be a little bit more proactive in this area and look at things such as, I don't know, maybe documentation, certain processes that we adhere to? Because I think from working with you and the rest of the neurodiversity group, I've realised that a lot of the processes that we have in general, not just the IET, across many different organisations and PEIs, they're really sort of geared towards people that are neurotypical. So what if you could ask an organisation to make some changes, what would those things be?
I think for me, I love process and logic. So actually, some really easy guides. I mean, I've seen companies do it very well, and I've also seen companies not do it so well. I've worked in the toy industry for some time, and the one thing I loved about working there is everything was color coded, right? It was based around primary colors and very child friendly, but also it made it very easy to understand processes, because the they had everything logically laid out as if it was a toy. And it was really nice because as much as it was complicated engineering or brand related work, it was logical because they understood that if you can make it as simple for everyone to understand or as logical, it helps everyone. I mean, I've also been in firms where it can take a day to find one bit of information, and it's just because one person who was maybe whose brain worked in one way, that seemed to be the norm, and that becomes a benchmark of what the right way of working is actually, no, let's actually work the way. I've always believed that if you work the way that a lot of dyslexics work, which is very logical and well laid out and big picture thinkers, you'll probably support the majority of your organisation.
Mm-hmm. Brilliant, thank you. And I'm just aware of time, and we are due to close at 1, so I don't want to keep anybody any longer than we need to. I'm just double checking, is that correct? Do we have any extra time at the moment? Or are we all okay for 1? Just double checking that. I think we're okay, that's fine. But this session has been recorded, so it will be available across multiple IET social media platforms. So do have a look out for that. And I'm aware that there are a few questions that we haven't been able to answer today, but we are more than happy to, and details of how you can get in contact with us will follow. So I would just like to thank everybody again for participating in today's session, but not just today, also the Neurodiversity Focus Group, which you give your time up for. So thank you very much, and thank you to all of you that have joined the session today.
Yes,
Thank you.
thank you very much.